The peeling laminated card on my console said, "Don't look back after the second footstep." And the bridge outside kept counting for someone else. My transmission quote expired at 9 a.m., which meant missing this shift meant missing my car. So I sat in the shack and pretended my hands weren't shaking. Heat climbed through the metal handrail when I grabbed it, warm through my gloves, and that single wrong detail stuck in my head like gum under a desk. Rules don't protect you, they train you. The pedestrian counter on my monitor ticked to 1, then 2, and then it kept moving. People who work graveyard security learn what empty places sound like, and I knew every sound under that bridge. The rivets popped when the cold tightened them. The river hissed against the pilings. The sodium light buzzed in a steady, bored way. At 3:14 a.m., on a Tuesday, the buzz cut out for half a second and came back wrong, and my finger hovered over the gate control because the card was already telling me what not to do. The shift binder sat open beside the keyboard, fat and swollen from damp, with a coffee ring dried into the first page, like an old bruise. Someone had stamped the cover with a revision tag in black ink, Rev 6C, and the spine had a staple shadow where a label used to be. I had a habit from my last job of tapping the binder twice before reading it, like the paper could lie less if I startled it, but that night the paper didn't need help. A sentence near the top had been underlined so hard, the pen tore the fibers and the underline ran straight through a smear where the ink had bled. The binder phrased it in a way that sounded like common sense, which should have been my first warning. After the second footstep, keep your head forward. Do not turn until you reach the far plate. The word after had a little tear right through it, a jagged missing triangle that made the line look like a dare instead of a warning. My job title was Contract Site Monitor, but the city paid my employer to call it Bridge Security because that sounded like somebody was doing something. The bridge itself had been condemned for 2 years, fenced at both ends, with a padlocked pedestrian gate and cameras bolted to the truss. My shack perched on the near bank in the shadow of the arch, a prefab box with a heater that never warmed the corners, and a monitor wall that never blinked at the same time. The system counted footsteps because some executive liked data. The city installed pressure strips on the planks before they closed it, a cheap way to catch trespassers, and the vendor promised clean numbers. My screen showed a simple line: footfall event, time, direction, count. A green bar rose with each step, and the sensor under the wood didn't care whether the step belonged to a boot, a wheel, or something that shouldn't have weight. The counter had climbed past 2 because someone had entered the bridge, and policy said I had to respond. Policy also said not to go out there after 2, which meant the policy never expected me to respond in person. That contradiction lived at the center of everything, and I let it sit there because I needed my car more than I needed to be brave. A shadow moved at the far edge of camera 2, right where the chain link fence met the first plank. The picture jumped when the auto exposure adjusted and the shape resolved into a person, an adult in a hoodie with a backpack, stepping over the lower rail with the easy confidence of somebody who had hopped fences for fun. The camera timestamp rolled cleanly, and the footfall counter climbed to 3 on my screen before the person even reached the first light pool. My thumb hit the intercom button out of pure reflex. "Hey," I said, and my voice cracked like I hadn't talked in days, which in a way I hadn't. "Bridge is closed. Turn around." The speaker on the pole by the gate crackled, and my words came out thin and delayed, like the bridge had to think about them. The trespasser froze, head tilting toward the speaker, and for a second the posture looked exactly like the day shift guy in training videos, the way they told contractors to listen to instructions. Then the hooded figure took another step forward. Footfall count 4. The laminated card wasn't long. It had a peel at one corner where somebody had tried to scrape it clean, and the plastic was cloudy with fingerprints. Someone had initialed the bottom in ballpoint. 2 letters that had bled into the laminate, and those 2 letters weren't anyone I knew. The card said, "If the counter shows more than 2, do not step onto the bridge to make contact. Close the gate. Log the breach. Wait for daylight escort." That sounded safe. It sounded responsible. It sounded like it would keep me alive and keep my job, which meant I wanted to believe it. My first lie slid out quietly, and it didn't even feel like a lie in the moment. I wrote in the log software that the counter had glitched at 3:14 a.m. No visual confirmation. I told myself the camera lag had missynced with the pressure strip because the vendor had been cutting corners since the install, and because my supervisor had already warned me about incident reports. Too many reports meant too much attention, and attention meant audits, and audits meant contractors getting cut. My second lie was worse because it pretended to be kindness. I didn't call dispatch. The binder had a number in the header that the vendor liked to pretend meant something, a form code tucked into the corner like a secret. I remember it because I stared at it while I rationalized BRG Ops 17. The line below it said the same sentence as the card, but with one more addition, and that addition had been half eaten by the coffee stain. If a trespasser reaches the second plank, do not look back after the second footstep. Continue forward to the far plate. Return only when the counter resets. Return only when the counter resets. My eyes went to the counter again, and my stomach tightened because the count hadn't stopped at 5 or 6. The green bar rose, paused, rose again, steady as a metronome, and I watched it climb through 8, 9, 10, like somebody on the bridge had plenty of time. A second shape moved on camera 2, and my brain tried to explain it as compression artifacting, because the picture sharpened in little blocks. The second shape crossed into the light pool behind the first, and it moved with the same timing, the same length of stride. No second person had hopped the fence. No second shadow had crossed the gate line. The system didn't care. Footfall count 11. A cold, simple thought cut through my excuses. If a report happened, my supervisor would say the system worked. If no report happened, my supervisor would say nothing happened. Either way, my name stayed off the paperwork, and that was the point. My phone buzzed once with a calendar reminder I couldn't afford to miss. A meeting with my mechanic, deposit due by noon, hold expires today. I had chosen the overnight shift because the hourly rate had a $1 bump, and I had lied to myself that I could catch up. Now that $1 bump pinned me to a chair while someone walked into a closed bridge. The intercom crackled again, but the noise wasn't my voice this time. A short burst of static popped. Then a breath, then a sound like a shoe sole dragging across old wood. The trespasser hadn't touched the intercom. The bridge had no microphone near the first plank. My shoulders hunched on their own, and my fingers curled around the handrail because that warmth felt like the only real thing. I took a sip from my coffee and regretted it immediately. because it had gone cold and bitter. And I hated that my mind noticed that detail while the counter climbed. The human part of me wanted to run out there and yank someone back. The trained part of me wanted to follow the rules and protect my paycheck. The trained part won for about 30 seconds. The far gate camera, camera 4, showed the opposite end of the bridge, a second fence line, and a second padlock. Nobody stood near it. Nobody moved. The water line under that end flashed faintly with light reflection, and the truss shadows drew hard diagonals across the planks. That camera had always been boring. At 3:16 a.m., the far camera auto exposure dipped, and a set of footprints appeared across the planks in the light pool. Not wet prints, not muddy, just darker patches in the wood grain. Someone had stepped there so often the planks remembered. My breath stuck and then came out too fast. Stupid. So stupid. The warmth in the handrail spread, and the heater inside my shack clicked off because the thermostat decided things were fine. The counter stopped at 14. Then it ticked to 15 without any motion on camera 2. Then it ticked to 16 and the green bar rose in a slow, satisfied way. I stood up because sitting felt like complicity, and complicity felt heavy. My old job, warehouse security, had trained me to check latches by double tapping them and to count locks without thinking, so I grabbed the shack keys and patted my vest pocket for the gate fob. The gate fob was a plastic circle on a lanyard, scuffed from fingers, with an inventory tag sticker still clinging to the back. The sticker had a misprint, 2 characters reversed, a tiny mistake that made the code look wrong to anyone who cared. I cared and I didn't. My boots hit gravel as I stepped outside, and the air under the bridge carried a damp stone smell that woke up something old in my throat. The gate stood 10 yards away, chain link and padlock, and a sign that said BRIDG closed in big block letters, half scraped by weather. The hooded trespasser stood on the first plank now, weight shifting from foot to foot in a restless way. That person wasn't alone. The second figure stood behind, a half step offset, moving only when the first moved, like a dancer mirroring a lid. The camera had captured it cleanly. My eyes captured it cleanly. My mind tried to argue anyway. I hit the intercom again. "Get off," I said, louder, meaner. "Now!" The hooded head turned toward the shack, and the posture held a fraction too long, like listening for the right response. Then the trespasser lifted a hand and pointed across the bridge, toward the far end, toward the empty light pool, and kept walking. Footfall count 17. My fob beeped at the gate reader. The sound was normal, and that normal sound made me feel worse because it meant the system still wanted to pretend. The lock clicked, and the gate swung inward, hinge squealing. I put a hand on the chain link to steady it, and the metal warmed under my palm again. The warmth traveled, slow, deliberate, not like heat from a lamp, more like a living thing pressing against the other side. A spray-painted warning ran across the lower rail right inside the gate, half hidden by shadow. Somebody had scrawled it in a thin, hurried hand, and rain had smeared the last word into a dark drip. The letters had been traced over, angry, then scratched at, like someone couldn't decide whether to leave it or erase it. A tiny symbol sat beneath the words, a straight line crossing a wavering line, carved with a key tip. The warning said, 2 steps only. Don't let it count the rest. The last word was smeared so badly it could have been rest or reset. The smear mattered more than it should have. A part of me wanted to laugh at graffiti on a condemned bridge, telling me what to do, because that fit the world I lived in. Another part of me felt my throat tighten, because that symbol under the words matched the misprinted sticker on my gate fob. The inventory tag had the same line crossing the same wavering line printed faintly, like a watermark nobody noticed. I stepped onto the first plank, because the trespasser had reached the second, and because I couldn't let someone die for my paperwork. My boot hit wood, and the footfall counter in my head clicked to 1, even before the screen in the shack could confirm it. The second plank creaked under my next step. Footfall count 18. My stomach dropped because the counter had jumped, and the sound of my second footstep didn't echo the way wood should echo under a bridge. The noise came back thin, delayed, like the bridge kept it and handed it back with a grin. My spine tingled and my eyes wanted to flick over my shoulder, to check behind, to count the shapes, to confirm reality. The laminated card had been clear, and the binder had underlined it until the paper tore. Don't look back after the second footstep. So I kept my head forward. My breath came shallow through my nose because I didn't trust my lungs. The trespasser was only 10 feet ahead now, and the hoodie had a patch on the shoulder with a reflective stripe, the kind construction crews wear. The backpack looked heavy, and the person moved like somebody with experience, not drunk, not reckless in a clumsy way, reckless in a deliberate way. An urban explorer. "Stop," I said, trying to sound like authority. "Bridge is condemned. Turn around. Gate is open." The trespasser slowed but didn't stop. The reflective stripe caught the sodium light, flashed, and the figure behind the explorer flashed at the same time, matching the motion, matching the angle, like the stripe existed on both shoulders. That made my hands sweat because my brain couldn't keep both images separate. My radio sat clipped to my vest, and I pressed the talk button out of habit. "Dispatch," I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Contract monitor at the bridge. Trespasser on deck. Requesting..." Static roared, loud enough to sting my ears, and the radio went dead. The display on it blinked once and went blank. Comm loss, just like the binder's worst-case list. And my heart punched my ribs because I hadn't even finished the sentence. Footfall count 19. The explorer stopped on the third plank. The graffiti had said 2 steps only. The explorer stood on the third plank, and the second figure stood 1 half step behind, and the air around them felt pressurized, like a storm building under the bridge with nowhere to go. My palms itched, my eyes watered, the warmth in the rail behind me faded, and the cold in the air sharpened, and my chest tightened because the soundscape changed. No river hiss. No hinge squeal. No sodium buzz. Silence snapped into place so hard my teeth clicked together. The explorer turned their head slightly, and I heard the smallest sound in the world. The fabric of a hood brushing against itself. Then a second hood brush answered it, perfectly timed. A sane part of me wanted to break the rule right then, to whip around and look, to confirm whatever stood behind. The trained part of me held my head forward so hard my neck hurt, and I hate that about myself, Because it wasn't bravery, it was obedience. The explorer's voice came out muffled but human. "Hey man," the person said, words slurring with nerves instead of alcohol. "I didn't see the sign. I just wanted pictures. I'll leave." Relief tried to rise in me, and guilt slapped it down because leaving meant walking back, and walking back meant turning around, and turning around meant looking back. The explorer shifted weight, lifted one boot, and the wood under that boot didn't creak. The boot came down without sound. Footfall count 20. My mouth went dry. A strip of memory flashed. Not a full flashback, just a training clip from 3 nights ago. My day shift co-worker standing in the shack with a highlighter, tapping the binder page. She had laughed at the idea of rules for a bridge, and she had looked tired in the way adults look tired when the job takes something personal. She was supposed to relieve me at 6 a.m. She was the only person on that contract who treated me like a human instead of a metric. Her name was Mara, and she had made me promise to stop covering for the system. The promise tightened in my chest as the silence held. "Listen," I said to the explorer, softening without meaning to. "Back up, slow. Take one step, then stop." The explorer nodded, and the nod looked wrong because the second figure nodded too, a fraction late, and the delay made the motion worse. The explorer took a step backward. My footfall counter brain ticked, and I forced myself to watch the explorer's boots, not my peripheral vision, not the shadow behind. The boot hit wood. The wood echoed twice. Footfall count 21. My throat tightened on a sound that wanted to be a curse. The silence shattered, and the river hiss returned, and the sodium buzz returned. And those normal noises made my skin crawl because they felt like a reward, a training treat. The system liked that I followed. The laminated card had another line, printed smaller. The kind of add-on that looks harmless. I had read it a dozen times and ignored it because it sounded like bad poetry. It said, "If extra steps begin, stop moving. Let the bridge finish the count." That line sounded safe. That line sounded like patience. That line was a trap, and I didn't understand that yet. So I froze because my job trained me to freeze when a rule told me to freeze. The explorer froze too, because the explorer thought I knew what I was doing. The second figure stopped moving because it never moved on its own. Footfall count 22. The counter didn't stop. The green bar rose with no sound and no motion, slow and inevitable, like the bridge was taking steps without feet. My hands shook, and I tucked my thumb under my fist to hide it, because that habit came from a father who hated weakness, and because habits show up at the worst times. I watched the explorer swallow, throat bobbing, and I realized the explorer was an adult, probably younger than me, probably fearless until this second. A thin electric smell drifted up from the planks, like ozone after a cheap charger overheats. My eyes stung. The explorer blinked hard and whispered, "Do you smell that?" I didn't answer, because the answer would have been yes, and yes would have made it real. Footfall count 23. A shape crossed into my peripheral vision, not behind, but beside to the right, where the truss cast a hard shadow. The shape moved like a person stepping from one shadow to the next, matching the beat of the unseen count. My stomach flipped because the shape shouldn't have been there. No one moved. No one stepped. My brain tried a theory because theories feel like control. Maybe the pressure strips were wired wrong. Maybe the vendor preloaded a count loop. Maybe Mara had been right when she called it a scam. Maybe this was a compliance test and somebody watched through the cameras to see whether I followed the card. The other theory, the one I didn't want, pressed at the edge of my mind. Something used the rules the way a lock uses a key. Obedience opened the door. Footfall count 24. The explorer's knee bent slightly, and I saw the urge to run. Running would be loud. Running would be rhythm. Running would feed the count. A hard choice formed in my gut, and it wasn't dramatic. It was ugly and practical. If I kept freezing like the card said, the bridge would finish whatever count it wanted. And then what? If I broke the rule and moved, I might stop the count, or I might make it worse. Either option could get the explorer hurt. Either option could get me fired. My HR file already held a probation notice for failure to follow site protocol, which meant one more incident could end the contract, which meant no paycheck, which meant no car, which meant no job at all. Mara's voice from earlier came back, plain and tired. She had pointed at the coffee smear and said, "Look at that. Somebody spilled on the rule and nobody replaced the page. That tells the truth about how much they care." I chose the human option because I couldn't stand the taste of my own cowardice anymore, and because my conscience finally outweighed my fear for a moment. I stepped forward on purpose, breaking the freeze, and grabbed the explorer's backpack strap. The strap felt wet, not from rain, but from something like sweat that didn't belong. The explorer flinched, and I heard the breath catch, and then I pulled, hard, toward the gate, toward the near bank, toward safety. Footfall count 25. The bridge answered my movement with a sound, and the sound was wrong because it wasn't wood creak or metal groan. A low click echoed under the planks, mechanical and precise, like an old turnstile counting entries. My heart slammed because that click had never been part of this place. The explorer stumbled, and the second figure stumbled too, matching the motion. And for one awful second, the explorer's reflective stripe flashed, and the second stripe flashed, and the two flashes lined up perfectly, like a single body split into two. The explorer gasped, "What is that?" Silence snapped again, and that silence hit harder because it came in response to my decision, like punishment. The explorer's head turned just slightly toward the shape behind, and panic spiked in me like a nail. "Don't," I blurted, then bit down on the word because it sounded like superstition. "Just keep moving." The explorer didn't listen because explorers don't listen, and because fear makes people reach for certainty. The head turned further. The explorer looked back. The world didn't explode. No monster lunged. No scream tore the air. The bridge stayed a bridge, planks and truss and river shadow. The explorer's face went slack anyway, like a person watching a car crash in slow motion. "I can't see it," the explorer whispered. "I can't see anything behind us." My skin crawled because I knew what that meant. The explorer's eyes looked right through the space where a second figure had stood, and the explorer saw nothing. The camera saw something, the counter saw something, the bridge saw something, and my obedience had kept my head forward so long that I hadn't checked my own reality. Footfall count 26. I broke the biggest rule without thinking, because the explorer's confusion flipped a switch in me. My neck snapped around, and my eyes locked on the planks behind. Nothing stood there. No second hood, no mirrored stripe, no shadow stepping between truss lines. The bridge behind was empty. My heart hammered so hard my vision pulsed. The silence held, thick, expectant, and a tiny part of me wanted to laugh because that emptiness looked like a trick. My gaze dropped to the planks, and I saw something else that made my stomach twist. Wet footprints, not leading toward the gate, leading away from it. The prints started right behind my heels, the exact size and tread of my boots, and they marched deeper onto the bridge in pairs, as if I had walked forward while I stood still. The prints kept going until they vanished into shadow, and the last visible print sat on the far plate, like a punctuation mark. The counter on my monitor in the shack, unseen but felt, kept rising. A cold realization settled into my bones. The rule hadn't been about looking back to avoid seeing something. The rule had been about looking back to avoid seeing proof. I didn't notice it then, not fully, not in the way that would have saved time. My eyes flicked past the misprinted inventory sticker on my lanyard, past that tiny symbol and past the graffiti scratch under the warning. And I kept moving because freezing felt like dying. I yanked the explorer toward the gate, and the explorer followed because the explorer finally understood that confidence meant nothing here. We ran the last few steps, and each step hit wood with a normal creak, but the counter in the shack kept ticking, and the silent click under the planks followed along like applause. The gate loomed, chain link and padlock and escape, and I slammed my shoulder into it, pushed it open, shoved the explorer through first. The explorer stumbled onto gravel and sucked in air like a drowning person. My foot hit the ground off the bridge, and relief tried to flood me. Footfall count 31. The counter didn't reset. The bridge kept counting even after my feet left it. The shack door hung open behind, and the monitor wall glowed in the darkness. The footfall log filled with entries faster than any single person could move. Lines stacking. Count 32. Count 33. Count 34. The direction field flipped between inbound and outbound, back and forth, like the bridge couldn't decide which way I was traveling. The explorer grabbed my arm. "Call someone," the explorer said, voice high, human, desperate. "Call the cops, call..." No cops, no agencies, no help that wouldn't become paperwork. That thought arrived fast, and it arrived with shame. I did the competent thing anyway because competence was all I had left. I shoved the explorer behind the shack, away from the bridge line, and told the explorer to stay low. The explorer stared at me like I was insane, then crouched because fear finally made the explorer obedient. I sprinted into the shack, grabbed the laptop, and yanked the Ethernet cable out and plugged it back in because I couldn't stand the thought of data leaving. Without me, my hands moved faster than my mind, muscle memory from nights of fixing cheap equipment. The surveillance software showed camera 2 and camera 4 side by side, and the footage made my stomach lurch. Camera 2 showed the bridge entrance empty. No trespasser. No me. The gate hung open, chain link swaying slightly, but no one stood there. Camera 4 showed the far end, still empty, still boring. The footfall counter kept climbing anyway. Hard proof. No bodies, no motion, and still the system counted. I grabbed the binder and flipped pages too fast, paper scraping under my fingers. The smell of damp ink rose, and my eyes landed on a paragraph Mara had highlighted, probably because she liked to prove points. It said, "If the bridge completes a count without visual confirmation, treat it as a system fault. Do not reset. Do not power cycle. Wait for vendor response." Vendor response meant an email 3 days later with polite language and no fix. A thought slammed into me, sharp and bitter. Maybe the bridge didn't want trespassers at all. Maybe it wanted the person paid to enforce the rules. Maybe it wanted me. My phone buzzed again with a reminder, and the vibration felt like mockery. Mechanic hold expires. Deposit due. I had never hated money more. Mara called at 3:27 a.m., which meant she was awake early for once, which meant she had sensed trouble the way adults sense trouble in quiet houses. Her name flashed on my screen, and my chest loosened for half a second because hearing a human voice felt like oxygen. I answered, and I kept my voice low because the explorer hid outside. "Mara," I said, and my throat tightened on the name because it made this real. "Don't come in early. Don't drive out here." "What happened?" she asked. No greetings, no small talk. Mara always went straight to the bruise. "The counter," I said. "It started counting on its own. A trespasser stepped on. Then the bridge." My words tangled because language wasn't built for this. It counted my boots without me moving. Mara went quiet, and that quiet scared me more than shouting. Then she exhaled slow. "Listen," she said. "Close the gate. Lock both ends. Then back away. Whatever it is, it stops when the gate's sealed." "That isn't in the binder," I said, and the accusation slipped out, because fear likes to blame. "Binder's missing pages," Mara snapped, and anger sharpened her tone. "I found that out last week. Somebody removed the vendor addendum. I tried to report it and the report vanished. The system eats paper. Do the simple thing. Lock it down." My heart thumped hard because she had said the phrase I'd been afraid to admit. The report vanished. Chain of custody, gone. I grabbed the gate control panel, the one with the green and red buttons, and my finger hovered. The bridge log on the screen flashed a warning in small text. "Remote closure available." The vendor had called it a safety feature. The city called it an expense. I pressed the button. The gate motor whined, and the chain link gate at the bridge entrance began to swing shut on camera 2. Slow and deliberate. Like a mouth closing, the latch met the post, the lock clicked. The footfall counter paused. Then it reset to 0. Relief hit so hard my knees almost buckled. A little laugh escaped my throat, ugly and involuntary, and I hated myself for how grateful I felt. The bridge fell silent in the normal way. River hiss and sodium buzz returning like they had never left. Mara's voice softened just enough to sound human again. "See?" she said. "Simple thing. No hero stuff." I swallowed and my tongue felt thick. "A trespasser is here," I admitted. "I pulled him off." Mara cursed under her breath. Get him gone, she said. No reports, no dispatch, just gone. The contract can't survive another incident, and neither can either of us. That line landed like a slap because it was practical and because it was true. Mara wasn't a villain. Mara was a person trying to live inside a system that punished honesty. The explorer stepped into the shack doorway, eyes wide, and I held up a hand to keep the explorer back. The explorer's face looked pale under the monitor glow. You're okay, I told the explorer, and my voice sounded like a lie. Gates locked. Bridges closed. Just leave. Walk the road back. Don't... I stopped myself before I said more, before I handed superstition to a stranger. The explorer shook head fast. I saw something, the explorer whispered. I saw my own footprints going the wrong way. I felt my skin tighten. Get out, I repeated, harsher. Now! The explorer backed away, hands raised, and then the explorer ran, gravel crunching, breath loud in the cold air. The sound of running faded down the access road, and for a moment the world returned to the boring misery I understood. I wanted to believe the problem ended there. I wanted to believe closing the gate fixed everything. I wanted to believe my lies would stay small and manageable. The monitor on the wall blinked, and a new message popped up in the vendor software. A plain text alert in the corner that the UI usually reserved for maintenance notices. The text shook slightly, like the font couldn't hold steady. A service notification appeared in the same window where the footfall logs lived, and it looked official enough to fool someone who wanted to be fooled. The subject line sat embedded in the sentence, like an afterthought. The system had auto-routed a memo titled Night Closure Procedure Update through QL6. A PDF icon blinked beside it. My hands went cold. I clicked it because curiosity is a weakness, and because my job trained me to click prompts. The document opened on screen, and the first line made my stomach drop, because it used the same wording as the laminated card, but cleaner, revised. After a bridge count begins, do not interrupt, do not stop it, do not reset. Let it complete the escort. The line below had the word escort in bold, and that bold felt like a grin. A coffee stain marked the lower corner of the PDF preview, exactly like the binder page, which made no sense because PDFs don't hold coffee rings. Mara's voice echoed in my head. The system eats paper. The trap rule on the laminated card flashed in my mind. If extra steps begin, stop moving. Let the bridge finish the count. The system wanted the count finished. The system wanted the escort completed. A dread line formed in my brain, clean and cruel. The bridge didn't want bodies. It wanted patterns. The shack's overhead light flickered once. Then it went out. My flashlight beam jumped across the desk as I grabbed it, and the beam caught the binder, caught the peeled, laminated card, caught the misprinted inventory sticker on my lanyard. The straight line crossing the wavering line stared back at me from 3 different places, like a signature. I hadn't noticed it then, not early enough, because I treated it like a vendor mark. A knock sounded from outside, 3 taps, evenly spaced. No one stood out there. The explorer had run. Mara was miles away. The gate was locked. 3 taps came again. Same rhythm, and my skin crawled because the taps matched the footfall cadence the counter had used. The bridge wasn't counting now, but it remembered how to. I pressed my back to the door because the cheap deadbolt always stuck, and I had learned to lean my weight into it when the wind pushed, a habit from a childhood house with bad locks, a habit I hated that night because it made me feel small. My radio display, dead a few minutes ago, blinked back to life with no battery change. The speaker hissed, and then a voice came through in a flat, professional tone. "Escort mode initiated," the voice said. "Return to the bridge to complete count. Failure to comply triggers access revocation." No name, no agency, no identity, just policy tone. I swallowed hard because my badge access was already a thread and the system knew exactly where to pull. Access revocation meant no gate fob, no shack door, no job, no paycheck, no car. It meant the kind of practical ruin that makes a person do stupid things. Mara's name flashed on my phone again. She didn't call. The phone called on its own, screen lighting with her contact, and the ringtone played without sound, like a mute alarm. The screen showed a voicemail transcript preview that my carrier auto-generated sometimes. And the preview line made my blood run cold because it contained words Mara never used. "Come back," the preview said. "Keep walking." My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. I ended the call and the phone immediately rang again. Same contact, same silent ringtone. I powered it off and the screen stayed lit. A choice formed in my gut, and it hit the moral part of me like a fist. If I obeyed the new memo and went back onto the bridge, I could keep my access, keep my job, keep my life stable. If I refused, the system would revoke access and strand me in the shack with no light, and maybe the bridge would come to me anyway. Mara mattered more than my paycheck, and I hated that I even waited. Mara had warned me, trained me, kept me from making mistakes that would get me fired. Mara had also told me to hide incidents, which meant she was trapped in the same compromise I was. My phone vibrated again, and this time the screen showed a location ping from Mara, a dropped pin that didn't include any message. The map preview showed the bridge area right by my shack. Mara wasn't supposed to be here. A cold thought arrived with a weight behind it. The system had called her. The system had used her name. The system knew which lever to pull in my chest. I opened the shack door because the air inside felt stale, and because staying inside felt like letting the system dictate everything. The gravel outside looked normal under my flashlight beam. The gate stood closed, chain link glinting. The bridge deck beyond sat empty. Mara's car headlights cut through the underbridge darkness from the access road, and relief surged so hard it almost hurt. The car rolled to a stop and the driver door opened. Mara stepped out, shoulders hunched in a jacket too thin for the cold, hair pulled into a messy knot. Her face looked tired, and that tiredness made her real in a way the system couldn't fake. "Mara," I said, and my voice broke. "Why are you here?" She held up her phone, screen glowing. "It pinged me," she said, voice tight. "It sent an auto alert to my number. It said a breach was in progress, and my shift would be marked as missed if I didn't respond. I can't take another point. Not this month." Her words hit the pressure point in my chest because they matched mine. The system didn't need ghosts. It had metrics. "I locked it down," I said. "Gate closed. Counter reset. Go home." Mara shook her head, and the motion looked stubborn and human. Gate isn't the only thing, she said. Did the vendor memo pop up? My throat tightened. Yeah. Mara's eyes flicked toward the bridge, then back to me. Then it isn't over, she said. It never is. The memo is how it gets the escort. A sound came from the bridge deck, faint, and my skin tightened because I recognized it. A shoe sole dragging across wood, slow, deliberate, like someone testing a plank. The sound didn't come from camera 2 or a speaker. It came from the actual bridge. Mara's face went white. No, she whispered. No. The gate chain link rattled once, not from wind, but from a hand gripping it from the other side. My flashlight beam jumped, and it caught fingers through the mesh. The fingers looked like mine. Same nail shape, same cracked cuticle on the index finger, same ring of dirt under the thumbnail from a night of touching rust. The fingers curled around the mesh, and the hand pressed close enough that the skin flattened. Mara made a noise in her throat, half gag, half laugh, because the brain doesn't know what to do with that. The hand on the gate held still, and then a second hand appeared beside it. Also mine, fingers spreading, palms pressing, like somebody trying to get out. The gate was locked. The bridge was closed. The hands were inside. My mind tried another theory because my mind couldn't accept the first. Maybe the vendor had installed a prank rig. Maybe someone had hacked the cameras and projected an image. Maybe I was sleep deprived and hallucinating. Maybe the explorer left a glove on the fence and my brain filled in the rest. Then the hands moved in perfect rhythm with an unheard count, and the nails clicked against metal, and the sound was real. Mara grabbed my sleeve. "Don't open it," she said, voice sharp with fear. "Don't! It wants the gate open." The binder had said close the gate and log it. The laminated card had said lock down and wait for daylight. The new vendor memo had said do not interrupt, do not reset, complete escort. The graffiti had said 2 steps only, don't let it count the rest. Rules everywhere, contradicting, overlapping, each one a lever. Following any of them felt like feeding something. The moral dilemma hit hard and simple. Leave Mara standing here with those hands on the gate. Go inside, lock the shack, save my job, and pretend, or step back onto the bridge, break the closure, and try to end the escort for real, risking both of our access and maybe our lives. Mara's grip tightened, and I felt the tremor in her fingers. She wasn't asking for hero stuff. She was asking for a choice that didn't exist. I looked at the gate. I looked at Mara. I looked at the shack, warm and safe behind me, with monitors that could lie and logs I could edit. Then I reached down, grabbed the padlock, and my key didn't fit. The lock cylinder had changed. The key that opened it every night slid in halfway and stopped, like the lock had decided I wasn't authorized anymore. Access revocation. Right on schedule. The system didn't wait for my choice. The system forced it. A laugh rose in my throat, bitter and scared. It already took my access, I said, and the admission tasted like defeat. Mara's eyes widened. Then how do we... A new sound cut through her words, and it made my skin crawl because it didn't belong to bridge or river or fence. Somewhere behind the gate on the deck, A page turned, slow and dry like paper in a binder flipping itself. One page, then another. The sound came with a faint plastic crackle like laminate peeling. That sound landed in my stomach and stayed there. A binder turning pages without wind meant someone reading, something reviewing. The hands on the mesh released, and the gate stopped rattling, and that quiet felt like the system holding its breath. Footsteps sounded on the deck. 2 steps, then a pause, then 2 more, keeping a steady beat. Mara whispered, "It's counting." The footfalls came closer, and my chest tightened because the rhythm matched my own walking cadence, the one I used when I paced the shack to stay awake. The system had learned me. "Back up," I told Mara, and my voice came out low and firm because fear sometimes makes a person competent. We moved away from the gate together, toward the shack, toward the road. But the footsteps didn't follow along the deck like a person approaching a fence. The footsteps sounded on gravel behind us. Mara whirled, flashlight beam swinging, and the beam caught nothing but the access road and her own car and the dark underbridge shadows. The footsteps continued anyway, matching our retreat, matching our speed, keeping time with our breath. I had a sudden, sick thought, and it came with a memory of the wet footprints on the bridge leading away from the gate. The bridge didn't need a body behind us. It could print one. Mara's phone buzzed in her hand, screen lighting. She glanced down, and her face went blank. "What?" I demanded, then stopped because the demand sounded too loud in the wrong air. Mara held the phone out, and the screen showed a message thread from the vendor support address that neither of us had ever used. The message didn't look like a system alert. It looked like a human wrote it, which made it worse. "Escort incomplete," it read. "Return to the far plate. Keep head forward." Mara swallowed. "It used my name in the signature," she whispered. "My initials, like I wrote it." The straight line crossing the wavering line sat at the bottom of the message like a seal. My hands clenched and unclenched. Micro-correction. My brain stuttered. 2 sets of rules. Wait. 3. Card, binder, memo, and graffiti. The graffiti, the smear, the symbol. The symbol sat on my lanyard, too. A line from earlier slammed back with new meaning. Rules don't protect you. They train you. The system didn't need belief. It needed compliance. I made a choice that felt like stepping into traffic, but my body moved anyway. I grabbed Mara's wrist gently, not to control her, but to steady her. "Stay in your car," I said. "Lock it. Keep the engine running. Don't open the door for anything that sounds like me." Mara stared at me like I had lost my mind. "What are you doing?" "Testing," I said, because the word gave me something to hold. Either this is a vendor scam with a nasty training script, or it's something that uses the script to get bodies on the deck. Either way, the symbol matters. Mara's jaw tightened. "That's not in any rule." "Exactly," I said, and anger sharpened my fear. "That's why it might be real." I walked to the gate control box. The metal housing bolted to a post, and I pried the panel open with my pocket screwdriver, because I always carried it. A habit from nights fixing cheap locks. The inside wiring looked clean. too clean, like someone had replaced it recently. A little label sat inside, printed with the vendor's asset tag. The tag had the same misprint as my lanyard sticker. I pulled the power connector. The gate control box went dark. The motor stopped humming. The system shouldn't count without power. The system shouldn't have any voice without power. The bridge should become a dead bridge again. Footsteps sounded on the gravel anyway, matching my movements, keeping perfect time. Mara's car headlights flickered once, and her dashboard lit brighter, then dimmer, like the car's electrical system responded to something nearby. She slammed her door shut and locked it, face pale through the windshield. My radio hissed again, voice returning, flat and professional. Escort mode initiated, it said. And then it added a second sentence, softer, almost amused. Power is optional. Hard proof. System logic didn't need electricity, or the system lied about what counted as power. A line of fear cut through me, sharp and clean. Maybe it wasn't the bridge. Maybe it was compliance. That thought held just enough plausibility to make it worse. I stepped closer to the gate, leaned in, and shone my flashlight through the chain link. The deck beyond looked empty, normal, planks stretching into shadow. The far plate sat 100 yards away, a metal patch where the vendor had bolted another sensor strip, the supposed endpoint. The rules treated that far plate like a finish line. The wet footprints I had seen earlier weren't there anymore. The wood looked clean. My stomach turned because evidence vanished when I looked away. The system ate paper. The system ate prints. Mara's phone buzzed again, and her eyes darted down despite herself. I saw her flinch. She mouthed something I couldn't hear through glass. My own phone, still powered on despite my earlier attempt, lit in my pocket with a notification sound that made my skin crawl. The sound wasn't my ringtone. It was a single footstep, played back, crisp and close. Then two. Then a pause. My hands shook. Close the door. Close it now. The panic loop ran through my head, childish and useless, and I forced it down because I needed a plan. A memory surfaced of the graffiti warning. 2 steps only. Don't let it count the rest. A memory surfaced of the binder line, torn where after should have been. And a third memory surfaced, small and odd, planted earlier and ignored. That misprinted inventory sticker with the symbol stuck to my lanyard. Not a vendor brand. Something deeper. The straight line crossing the wavering line. The explorer had said the footprints went the wrong way. The footprints had matched my boots. The system wasn't copying a person. The system was copying the role. Contract monitor, escort, compliance. I reached into the shack, grabbed the binder, and carried it outside like a shield. Because paper feels like authority, even when it lies, the coffee ring on the page made a crescent across the underlined rule, and I stared at the smear like it could confess. My flashlight beam caught the torn fiber at the word after again, and I saw something I hadn't seen because I hadn't wanted to. The tear wasn't random. It sliced through the paper in a straight line, then bent into a little wave. Straight line, wavering line. The symbol wasn't decoration. The symbol was a cut. A trap key. I breathed out, slow, and my voice came out steady because anger gave it shape. It isn't a rule, I muttered. It's a lock. The footsteps on gravel stopped behind me. Silence snapped hard again, stealing the river hiss and the sodium buzz. My skin prickled. Mara's car engine noise dropped away, and the world became a vacuum, waiting. Then right behind my shoulder, a voice spoke in my own cadence, quiet and close. "Keep going," the voice said. Not Mara, not dispatch, not the vendor UI. My own voice. My stomach clenched, and I didn't turn because turning felt like falling into a hole. The laminated card had told me not to look back after the second footstep. The new memo had told me to keep head forward. The system wanted my eyes ahead. I forced myself to do the opposite of obedience without breaking the firewall in my own head. I didn't spin, I didn't whip around. I shifted my flashlight beam downward toward the ground, toward proof. A wet footprint appeared on the gravel beside my boot, forming in the dirt in real time, like an invisible foot pressed down. Then another wet print formed ahead of it. Then another. The prints were my boots again, same tread, same size, and they led toward Mara's car. The system didn't need my body. It used my pattern to create a path. Mara pounded on her car window from inside, eyes wide, and her mouth shaped my name. She looked like a person watching a bad dream approach. The wet prints reached her driver's side door. The door handle moved. Mara screamed, and the scream didn't make sound because the silence still held, and watching a silent scream broke something in me. I ran. Running broke every calm protocol in my brain, but running was also a choice, and choices mattered. My feet hit gravel, and the wet prints appeared ahead of me now, matching my stride, leading me to the car door before I could reach it. The handle lifted again. Mara's hand fumbled with her seatbelt, trapped in a stupid strap because panic makes simple things hard. She hit the horn. No sound came. I slammed my palm against the driver's door, and the metal burned warm under my skin. That same wrong warmth from the rail. My reflection in the window looked normal, face pale, mouth open, eyes wide. Then a second reflection slid into place beside mine, matching my posture, matching my open mouth. But the second reflection smiled. The smile moved first, then the rest of the face caught up like the image lagged. My hands shook. 3 reflections. Wait. 4. I yanked the binder up and smashed it against the window, hard enough to crack the cheap plastic cover. The sound didn't reach my ears because the silence held, but the impact vibrated up my arms, real and painful. The binder splintered at the spine, and paper spilled out, pages fluttering without wind, like the bridge wanted them loose. A single loose page slapped against the window, stuck there by moisture, and my eyes caught a line of text that hadn't been in the binder before. The ink looked fresh, too dark, and the sentence was short, imperative, and sickeningly polite. If you reach the vehicle, open the door and complete the escort. My throat tightened because the sentence used the same vendor tone as the memo. The system wrote new rules when needed. It didn't care about paper. Mara's eyes found mine through the glass, and she shook her head fast, pleading. Her lips mouthed, "Don't." The moral collision hit again, sharper. Policy tone demanded one thing. Human safety demanded another. Breaking policy might get her hurt. Following policy would. I forced my mind into competence mode because panic wasn't a plan. The symbol, the misprint, the straight line crossing the wavering line, the tear in the binder, the graffiti scratch. A lock needs a key, a lock also has a flaw. I grabbed the loose page stuck to the window and tore it off, ink smearing on my fingers, and I saw the symbol in the corner of the page printed faint like a watermark. I pressed my ink-smeared thumb over it, hard, and the ink heated under my skin, like the symbol drank it. My breath came fast. No, not like this. The thought came, then corrected itself. Like this. Exactly like this. I slammed my ink-smeared thumb onto the gate control box's open wiring, right over the vendor asset tag with the misprint. The tag's symbol matched the watermark. My thumbprint covered it. The box sparked once, tiny and sharp, and the silence snapped off like a light switch. The river hiss rushed back. The car engine roared. The sodium buzz screamed in my ears. Sound flooded in so hard I staggered. Mara's horn blared, loud and raw, and I almost cried at the normal brutality of it. The wet prints on gravel went dull and faded, drying in seconds, and the car door handle dropped back down. Mara sucked in a sobbing breath and yelled, "What did you do?" "I don't know," I yelled back, voice cracking. "Drive, go, now." She fumbled with the gear shift, tires spinning on gravel, and the car lurched forward, headlights washing over the bridge fence and the locked gate. For a split second, the beams lit the chain link, and behind it, on the bridge deck, a figure stood in the shadows. Not a full creature, not a person, a shape with the outline of a man. But the joints bent wrong, and the head held too still, like a still frame waiting to be played. The figure's feet were bare on the planks, and the toes pointed backward, and the body leaned forward like it wanted to sprint without moving. Then the headlights swung away and the shape vanished into dark. Mara's car tore down the access road, engine whining, and my chest heaved because I had bought her a few seconds, maybe a few miles. My own hands shook, ink smeared, and my thumb burned where it had touched the tag, like I had pressed skin onto hot metal. The footfall counter in the shack beeped once, a normal UI sound, and that normal sound felt obscene. I stumbled back inside, grabbed the laptop, and pulled up the logs because proof mattered. The footfall event list showed a clean reset at 3:41 a.m., neat and tidy, like nothing had happened. The camera footage, though, showed the car door handle lifting on its own, showed my reflection and the second reflection smiling, showed the wet prints forming on gravel. Evidence confirmation, hard proof. A little laugh escaped my throat, bitter again. "So it can be recorded," I muttered. "So it can be proven." I clicked export. The export bar filled, then froze at 99%. My hands clenched. "Come on," I whispered, then hated myself for begging a system. The screen flashed, and the exported file vanished from the folder before my eyes. The cursor hovered over empty space. I checked again. I checked it again. The file didn't return. My email client opened on its own because the laptop was tied to the vendor network. and a draft email appeared addressed to my supervisor's generic safety inbox, the one nobody read unless forced. The subject line typed itself in the field without my fingers. Night closure procedure update. The body text began to fill word by word in my own writing style, and the words made my stomach turn. Escort completed, no incident. The system wanted me to sign that lie. My hands hovered over the keyboard, trembling, and my mind snapped back to Mara's earlier confession. She had said her report vanished. The system ate paper. So I did the responsible thing. I copied the camera clip frames into a plain image file, low-tech, and I attached them to an email addressed to a personal contact I trusted. Not a company inbox, an old coworker who worked IT at a different firm and owed me a favor. I wrote only one sentence in the body, plain, ugly, no drama. Something on the bridge uses our names to force compliance. Please store this off-site. I hit send. The sent folder stayed empty. A second later, a new folder appeared in my email sidebar, one I hadn't created. The folder name was a string of characters that didn't mean anything, and inside it sat my email, filed neatly, flagged as resolved. My stomach turned. A chain of custody stolen in real time. A cold coda formed in my mind. The system didn't erase evidence, it relocated it. My radio hissed again, and the flat voice returned, softer this time, almost satisfied. Escort mode pending, it said. Return to the far plate. The bridge wanted a finish line. I stepped outside again because staying inside meant waiting to be moved like a piece. The gate still stood locked. The power box still hung open. My thumb still burned. Under the gate rail, beneath the graffiti warning, I noticed a thing I hadn't noticed earlier because fear narrows vision. A small metal tag had been bolted to the post, half hidden by rust. The tag had an inventory number stamped into it, and the last two characters were reversed. The same misprint again. The symbol sat beside it, stamped deep. The vendor didn't accidentally misprint the same way everywhere. This wasn't a mistake. This was a mark. It marked tools, it marked personnel, it marked roles. My throat tightened because the implication landed hard. The system wasn't haunted. The system was designed. The bridge was a device. The rules weren't safety, they were training. The bridge didn't echo right because echo implies a place answers a person. This place answered a protocol. I pulled a marker from the shack desk, one of those cheap ones used to label boxes, and I wrote across the laminated card's back, over the peel and fingerprints. A sentence that didn't feel clever, just necessary. Do not follow the rule that keeps eyes forward. I taped the card to the outside of the gate where anyone who climbed the fence would see it. The tape stuck crooked because my hands shook, and the crookedness felt honest. Then I took my key and scratched the symbol into the post below it. Straight line crossing wavering line. But I cut it wrong on purpose. I made the wavering line jagged. I broke the symmetry. A small act of defiance, a small act of sabotage. The river hissed under the bridge, indifferent. The sodium light buzzed overhead, steady. Normal world noises returned, and that normality didn't comfort me anymore. Normality just meant the system waited. A final line from the vendor memo floated up in my mind. and it landed with dread because it read like a promise. Let it complete the escort. I realized something then, too late and too sharp, and it made my skin go cold all over. The footfall counter sensors never needed a trespasser to start counting. They needed a trigger. The trigger had been my gate fob. The first time the counter climbed past 2, my lanyard had been on my chest, the misprinted tag pressed against my shirt, the symbol warm against my skin. I had crossed the gate line with it. I had initiated the escort by clocking in. Unless the rules were never about safety. Behind me, from the dark under the bridge, a voice in my own cadence spoke the 4 words Mara had joked about in training. The phrase, she said, kept a person steady on long nights. The phrase I'd treated like nothing. Keep your rhythm, it whispered. My thumb still burned, and the gate metal still felt warm. And at 4:03 a.m., the monitor in the shack flashed a new footfall event while the bridge deck stayed empty. The note I left on the post ended with, "If you've seen that symbol before, don't ignore it.